comprar um bilhete para sair dali. Mas o chefe da estação não gostou do meu cabelo. E aí veio um polícia que era chefe no Fundão. E fomos todos parar à tasca do José da estação. Lá estava o José a vender o seu vinho, sandes de bacalhau e o seu melhor tocinho. E o chefe da polícia encostou a barriga ao balcão. Venha uma garrafinha da adega cooperativa do Fundão.
Take your seats for landing.
The print you're going to see was rediscovered just last year. He died 1 year after this film was made. Nobody knew this print existed, this director's cut, because he was fired when he finished the film. He did his own cut. He had no right for a final cut, which I'm sure you know what it is. And the producers didn't like his version, so they recut it for theatrical release for all the countries in the world. And he didn't like it, of course, and he made his own cut, which was never shown. He did it for himself, for his own archive. And the man who made the archive for him is a friend of mine. And 2 years ago he called me and said, I still have this print. It's the only print in the world. And you do all this great work for 20 years in Peckinpah, you do something with it. He gave it to me. And by chance in Australia there was a company who released the film on Blu-ray just 4 weeks ago. And just a few words to the production history. If you know a little bit about Peckinpah, you know that it's not one of his important films. It was his last film. He had a very troubled career. For my money, he made one of the best films ever made, which is Grupo Salvajes in Spanish, The Wild Bunch. I think you cannot make a better film. This is certainly is not The Wild Bunch, but it's his last film, and it's important because he was out of work for 5 years before he made the film, and he died a year later. So he had no creative control. He could not work on the script. He just could say yes or no to the actors, and he got a great cast. There's Rutger Hauer, Dennis Hopper, Burt Lancaster, John Hurt. But he couldn't put sense into the script. But I hope you'll enjoy it anyway. And when you watch maybe my film in 2 days, you're gonna learn a little bit about his career and realize how it came to this point late in his life that he made this movie, which we're gonna see now. If you want to talk about it later on, we have a few drinks or something. Or all through the next days, I'm gonna be here. But thank you so much for coming, and let's see what happens. critics who overlook the visual quality of films, because many critics, and especially the Americans, they go for story, which is big here, of course, because it's Shakespeare, in my opinion. But in general, movies are visual. It's a motion picture. And Sam, I think, was the best regarding camera angles, exactly which shot you need, when and where, and how it is filmed. And the film was shot 54 years ago, I mean, and look, it still looks fresh. By the time, it had the most cuts any film ever had in history. Cut means from one shot to the next. It was 3,600 something. And the editing is fast, but it's not too fast like today. Back then it was, of course, a bit of a shock for the audience, because they never saw a film like this.
I wrote it as I do all the work that I do. It's something that I want to see from the story that I was given. So I didn't write it to shock the audience. I wrote it as something that I would pay money to see. I make pictures for myself and hope that I'm part of the audience, that I am the audience.
The power of the film was so immense that it had such an impact. It made his career, of course. But the many layers, like Manuel said, are the thing. And like with all great art, you can find, everybody finds something else in great art. People constantly say it's a film about the dying West, the change of times, and this is the most important theme of the movie. I would totally disagree, of course. It's only one layer. The setting in the early 20th century. And there's another layer, of course, is the violence, which was his comment on the Vietnam War. And he said it in my film, if you saw it. He said he was not consciously making a Western. He was commenting on his times. This is not the Wild West, this is 1913. Just a year before the First World War starts. The Mexican Revolution was in its full going. And to me, the center of the film is William Holden. It's all about his character, his person. He's putting layers of guilt in his life. And this is what Sam was after. You see it from the first moment. He sacrifices Bo Hopkins in the first robbery scene, in the big shootout, because he's a bit of a crazy guy, the young guy. So he more or less sacrifices him. He leaves him behind. Later he realizes it's the grandchild of Edmund O'Brien, Sykes, the old man. And all through the film you see the guilt he was building up in his life. He couldn't take care of his woman, she died. His best friend got to jail because he said, being sure is my business. It means I'm responsible, trust me, you know. And the other guy got caught into jail, and we saw him being tortured only for 2 seconds. And it's all these little details in the film that build up that whole thing until the end. And I don't think I've seen a film who would ever reproduce such an impact in general.
Who do you screw to get out of this place? Well, there's one for the money and too far to go. 3 fingers of whiskey just for the soul.
All my guts, all my life, everything I am is up there on that screen. So every morning you get up, you commit, and you do the best you can, that's all.
Nobody knew the West like Sam did. And he told the truth. He really told the truth.
If you're going to make a picture with Peckinpah, then hire Peckinpah and get the hell out of his way.
He was a guy who was a genius for 3 hours a day, sometimes more, depending on how much he was drinking.
All of us kind of felt proud that we were working with a director who tell producers go fuck themselves, you know what I mean?
It's the most extraordinary thing that if you'd worked with Sam, you were part of some kind of, I don't know, brotherhood or fellowship or something. It's very, very hard to explain.
I love that guy so much. What a shame. What a fucking shame.
I was told that I had a particular style. I said, yeah, really? Because, you know, I couldn't care less. But it doesn't concern me. I don't consciously work out anything. All my guts, all my life, everything I am is up there on that screen. It's all there. It's right there. Everything I feel, everything I am is there.
You have another documentary called Love and Passion Project, where you talk about the making of the film. And since we haven't seen it here, would you talk about how you were able to talk with Ernst Born and L.Q. Jones, and because it was tricky, right? It was complicated. The one you mentioned, the Passion Poetry Project documentary, is about the series I made. I counted 12 documentaries so far on Peckinpah. This is the centerpiece, of course. So I still like the film. It's plays good for an audience in a cinema, I guess. The other documentaries I did are all out on Blu-ray, and I made a documentary on each of his films, like a 1-hour documentary on Alfredo Garcia, which is out on Blu-ray, and a long one on Cross of Iron or Convoy. So this is an ongoing project, because I shot 30 hours of interview footage when I did this. Already knowing that maybe in the future I need the interviews for other projects. And this is what I do, I still use them. I made one on Major Dundee just 2 or 3 years ago, which is 75 minutes long. And there you have everything from Santa Berger, Coburn, and Mario Adolf. He's only a split second in the film, but it's already 2 hours long. The first cut was almost 2.5 hours, and I was like, nobody's gonna see this, you know, who's gonna watch a documentary that long? So I spent a lot of time editing it, maybe 6 or 7 months. But this Passion Poetry thing is an ongoing project until today. And we saw one here 2 days ago, the Sam's Final Cut, if you saw it. This is not a good documentary, of course, it's just an extra for Blu-ray, but I'm still doing it under the title of Passion and Poetry. And there will be more to come, probably. Okay, but when you shot the footage and trying to find the people, would you care to talk about the shooting in Mexico? This all happened by accident, because I started in feature filmmaking rather late. I was already 30 years old. Where I grew up, in Germany, it's a town called Sindelfingen. This is where they built Mercedes-Benz, but there's no art, there's nothing. It's only technical, except for Roland Emmerich, who was in the same school, you know him, the director of Independence Day. He's 10 years older, and he shot his first science fiction movies in my hometown. So I watched him filming, and I was an assistant a little bit. I was 15, 16 years old. And I never thought I could make films, because these films cost 5 or 10 million Deutschmarks or euros or whatever. And when I moved to Munich, I met Robert Rodriguez, you know, and he made El Mariachi for $8,000, which I didn't believe, but he told me how to do it.
Well, look at what you're doing right now is exactly what I did, except you have a better camera stand than I have.
It's from the 60s.
That's for a 16 millimeter. I had like a video tripod. We actually should have switched stands. But you're filming by yourself right now because you're shooting on video, and that's how I learned. I learned on video. So when I got a film camera, it just didn't make sense to do what they said, which was suddenly get a big crew. I mean, it was faster and easier like that. So I just continued shooting that way by myself and just did everything else myself.
He told me how to do it, and then I made a feature film, the cheapest action feature film ever made in Germany, on 16mm, Super 16, not on video or anything. It's completely different when you shoot on film because it's so expensive, of course. And so I started with feature filmmaking, and it worked all right, and I learned a lot. And just when I wanted to do a second feature film or start writing it, I got an invitation to a retrospective of Sam's in Padua in Italy. And in Italy we had James Coburn, Ellie McGraw, and somehow and Katie Haber, who's the center of the rest of the people who are still alive. She was with him for so many years, and we became family. And it was a great 2-week retrospective. We spent all day long in restaurants, and eating, getting drunk, and then before that I already thought maybe I should make a documentary on Peckinpah. Once I get to know Coburn, these people, but you don't know how they react. But they liked me, and they said, okay, we'll do that. And I had a German television co-producer, but just when I started shooting, they dropped out, as it is so often. And I said, okay, what can I do? So I do it Rodriguez style. I just bought a camera cheap and made some money selling old movie posters I had and financed myself. And thanks to Katie, she gave me telephone numbers, I got the people. But I had to pass some tests with some of them, you're right, it was not that easy.
E o teu mundo a teus pés, como sonhaste, como és, cedo ou tarde.
One of the films, the only film he did where lots of stuff was improvised, also with the German actors. He liked this wildness. They shot in Yugoslavia because Tito loved cinema and he always supported international companies. So this was a problematic production from the start because they hadn't have enough money. And he went far over budget, he couldn't even finish the film. The finish of the film is a complete improvisation because they ran out of money. He shot so much footage, I think 250,000 meters of film. Had a happy end because the film was a big success in Europe. In America, and Sam was very sad about this, nobody wanted to see the film because there's not a single American GI in the movie, it's only about Germans and Russians. The Americans only want to see GIs fighting, the hero stuff. But in the rest of the world it was quite successful. The Japanese still love the film because it's also about a certain code, like the Wild Bunch. You will find many similarities also with the Wild Bunch and the themes of Peckinpah's work, which he sneaked into the script while he was rewriting it. The battle scenes look like he had a huge budget, but he had only 3 tanks and only 2 were working. One was not even working. When you see that scene, it's so well shot, you think it's a big battle. The way he did it with his angles, with the background, with smoke, he covered a lot. It's still very intense after all these years, I think. I made a 1-hour documentary about the film, which is out on Blu-ray, and I was able to get lots of the German actors, Martin Glofner and Santa, of course, and they told me great stories, how Sam really bonded with the German actors. And he liked them very much, and they stayed friends until he died, especially Martin Glofner. He became a filmmaker in Germany, and Sam was like his father to him. Vadim is not among us anymore, he left us. He became a dear friend of mine, and he gave me all the letters he exchanged between Sam and him. And Sam always wrote to him, "Dear son." So he had an adoptive father in Sam Peckinpah, which is not the worst thing to have. I mean, he did his first film, he went to California and showed it to Sam, and Sam was very proud of him, and they were dear friends. And he had a great experience in Yugoslavia with all these people and the craziness that was involved in the making of the film. it's very dear to my heart, and I'm very glad we can see it together here on the big screen. So maybe we can talk later about it. Would be nice. Wow. You can translate it. It's in Portuguese, but my Portuguese is very bad. This agora eu tenho irmão português. Something like this? Yes, correct. Mario, obrigado.
As coisas simples foram postas um pouco à parte. O nubento ultrajado serve restos à la carte. No pátio das camélias saem rosas camufladas, guizos e grinaldas, perucas veras e laçadas, como num filme, na luz da ribalta. O bisturi do doutor rasga consultas à pressa, enquanto o aprendiz de ator aguarda pela peça. E o androide do bom redil continua a errar, à espera que lhe mudem o comando e o lugar. Coisa frustra que não faz falta, e sobram doces em parques, camelas, fecundos atritos, revestes mazelas de astronauta. O filho do idil não nem faz o vão da escada, recobra do esforço da cerveja e da noitada. E o brabo do asfalto, com o braço ainda ao peito, grita que lhe fizeram a cama mesmo a jeito, como num sonho de poder ir revolta. Do rosto do fantasma caem lágrimas de gel, e do doce cor de púrpura feitos de europeu. E o velho do mar, perdido no meio da neblina, toca assim de em vão à espera de ajuda divina, como num filme. Mãozinha de água